CEO humiliated a single dad at lunch. Then one phone call ended her father's career. What happened when a CEO humiliated a single dad at lunch? What could one phone call change after such a moment? Hello, everyone. We hope you're having a wonderful day filled with positive energy, happiness, and good fortune. Please give us about 5 seconds to share a small piece of your kindness with us by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Thank you so much for being here, supporting us, and joining this community. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you are watching from and what time is right now. Now, let us begin the story. Sir, I believe this table is reserved for people who actually belong here. Victoria Bennett's voice was calm, but the words carried across the quiet restaurant like a message everyone understood. The single dad sitting across from her did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply placed his coffee cup down and looked at her with the same patience he had shown his entire life. The restaurant was filled with the soft sounds of silverware, conversations, and the distant hum of the city outside the windows. Ethan Walker had only come to this Manhattan restaurant for a simple lunch meeting before picking up his daughter from school. He was wearing a clean but modest jacket, carrying an old leather folder, and living the same quiet life he had chosen after years of sacrifice. To everyone watching, he looked like an ordinary father trying to get through another busy day. Victoria Bennett saw something different. She saw someone she believed did not match the world she had built around herself. "You seem confused," she said. "This is a place where people discuss serious business." Ethan remained silent. He had learned long ago that dignity did not need permission to exist. He had spent years fixing problems, raising his daughter, and carrying responsibilities without asking anyone to notice. But that afternoon, the people around the room began to notice something unusual. They noticed that the man being judged was not embarrassed. They noticed that the woman with influence and success was the only one losing. Control of the moment. Ethan gently closed his folder and stood. "I hope your day goes well, Ms. Bennett," he said quietly. "I think we both have things to learn." Those words stayed in the air longer than anyone expected. Victoria watched him walk away, unaware that the quiet father she had dismissed was connected to a part of her family's world she had never understood. Outside, the streets of New York continued moving. Cars passed. People rushed between buildings. The city never stopped for one person's mistake. But sometimes, one small moment reveals a much bigger truth. Ethan Walker was not looking for recognition. He was not trying to prove anything. He was simply a father who believed respect should be given before it is requested. And Victoria Bennett had no idea that the man she judged in a crowded restaurant would soon become the person her family needed most. The next morning, Ethan Walker woke up before the alarm on his phone ever had the chance to ring. The small apartment was quiet except for the gentle sound of his daughter Emma preparing her school bag in the next room. "Dad, are you coming to my science presentation today? I would not miss it for anything. Even if you have work?" Ethan smiled. "Especially if I have work." For Ethan, those moments mattered more than any title or paycheck. He had learned that success was not only about what a person achieved, but about what they protected along the way. After dropping Emma off at school, Ethan returned to his small office where he reviewed documents from his consulting work. Most people saw him as a simple father trying to rebuild his life. They did not know the years he had spent solving complex problems behind closed doors. They did not know the companies that once depended on his ideas. Ethan had never talked about those years because he believed character was not something you announced. It was something you carried. Across the city, Victoria Bennett sat in her executive office overlooking Manhattan. The memory of the restaurant still bothered her. Not because Ethan had challenged her. He had not. Not because he had embarrassed her. He had not. What bothered her was the calm in his eyes. She was used to people reacting to her position, her name, and her influence. But Ethan had treated her like any other person. "Who was that man?" she asked her assistant, Claire. Claire looked through the notes from the lunch meeting. "His name is Ethan Walker. He works independently now." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Independently?" "Yes. He does not appear to have any major company behind him." Victoria looked away from the window. Something about that answer felt incomplete. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his day without thinking about the encounter. He helped a local business owner review a technical issue, picked up Emma from school, and spent the evening helping her finish her science project. The world of corporate meetings and billion-dollar decisions felt far away. But sometimes the past has a way of returning when people least expect it. That evening, Victoria received an urgent message from her father, Richard Bennett, the chairman of Bennett Global. Several major decisions inside the company had created unexpected complications. The board needed answers quickly. "We need someone who understands the original system design," Richard said during the call. Victoria listened carefully. Who created it? There was a pause. Then her father gave an answer she did not expect. A man named Ethan Walker. The room became still. The same man she had dismissed at lunch. The same man she believed did not belong in her world. Victoria looked at the information in front of her again. For the first time, she wondered if she had judged someone she never truly understood. And somewhere across the city, Ethan continued helping his daughter prepare for tomorrow, unaware that his quiet past was about to return and reveal a truth that would change the way powerful people saw him forever. The following morning, Ethan Walker arrived at his small office with the same quiet routine he had followed for years. A cup of coffee rested beside his old laptop. The morning light entered through the window, touching the shelves filled with technical notes, family photographs, and memories from a life he rarely talked about. "You still keep all of those papers?" his friend Michael asked. "Some things are worth remembering, even the things you left behind." Ethan looked at the documents in his hands, especially those. Ethan had never hated his past. He simply chose a different future. After losing his wife, he made a decision that changed everything. He stepped away from the corporate world and focused on raising Emma. Many people thought he had given up. They saw a man who walked away from success. They never saw the strength it took to choose family over recognition. Across the city, Victoria Bennett was discovering pieces of a story she had never known. She sat in her office reviewing old company records with her assistant Claire. The more she learned, the quieter she became. "He designed the foundation system?" Victoria asked. Claire nodded. "Yes. The original architecture that helped the company expand was based on his work." Victoria looked at the documents again. "Then why did nobody mention him?" Claire hesitated. "Because he left before the company became what it is today." That answer stayed with Victoria. She remembered Ethan sitting at the restaurant table. No anger. No need to defend himself. Just calm confidence. For the first time, she wondered if she had mistaken humility for weakness. Meanwhile, Richard Bennett prepared for an important board meeting. The company had grown into a global organization, but recent challenges were creating uncertainty. Executives offered opinions. Advisors suggested expensive solutions. Everyone had an answer, but nobody had the one thing Richard needed: understanding of the original system. "We need Ethan Walker here," one senior advisor finally said. The room became silent. Richard leaned back in his chair. "After all these years?" "Yes, because he built what everyone is trying to repair." That afternoon, Victoria made a decision. She drove away from the glass towers and into a quieter part of the city where Ethan worked. She found him helping a customer understand a complicated issue. He was patient. He listened. He explained everything clearly. It was completely different from the world she knew. There was no pressure to impress anyone, no desire to appear important, just a person focused on helping another person. When Ethan noticed her standing there, he looked surprised. "Ms. Bennett." Victoria took a moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology." Ethan studied her expression. He could see that something had changed. "For lunch?" he asked. She nodded. "For assuming I knew your value before I knew your story." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he replied gently, "Most people only see what is in front of them. The challenge is remembering there is always more beneath the surface." Those words followed Victoria long after she left, because she finally understood something important. The man she had judged was never trying to prove he was important. He had already known his own worth. And now, her family's future depended on the person she once failed to respect. The next few days brought a change that even Ethan Walker could feel, though he never searched for it. His quiet office, once a place where he worked alone, became the meeting point between two very different worlds. One side represented years of corporate ambition, powerful names, and billion-dollar decisions. The other represented patience, family, and a man who had learned that true success was measured by the people you helped along the way. You really want to go back there? Michael asked. It is not about going back. Ethan looked through the window. It is about helping when someone needs help. Even after the way they treated you? Ethan gave a small smile. A person's mistake does not decide my character. That was the difference between Ethan and the people who underestimated him. He did not allow someone else's judgment to change who he was. At Bennett Global Headquarters, Victoria prepared for the meeting with Ethan. She reviewed every document connected to the company's early years. Every page revealed another piece of a story she had never heard. Ethan had not walked away because he failed. He walked away because he valued something more important than a title. His daughter, his peace, his principles. When Ethan arrived at the headquarters, the atmosphere was different from the restaurant days before. Employees watched him quietly. Some recognized his name. Others were curious about why someone so ordinary was entering a building filled with executives and investors. Ethan did not react to the attention. He simply walked forward with the same calm expression he carried everywhere. Victoria greeted him near the conference room. Thank you for coming. Ethan nodded. I hope I can help. Inside the room, Richard Bennett sat with several senior executives. The discussion was serious, but Ethan listened before speaking. He studied the information carefully. He asked questions. He considered every detail. Then he explained what he saw. The problem is not the system itself, Ethan said. The problem is that people stopped understanding the purpose behind it. The executives looked at each other. They had expected complicated explanations and expensive solutions. Instead, Ethan focused on the foundation. The simple things everyone had ignored. Richard leaned forward. How long would this take to fix? Ethan answered honestly. It will take time, but the right solution is worth more than the fastest solution. The room became quiet. Victoria noticed something she had never seen before. People were listening to Ethan not because of his position, but because of his wisdom. For years, she had believed influence came from having the loudest voice in the room. Ethan showed her something different. Sometimes the person speaking the least is the one everyone needs to hear. After the meeting, Victoria walked beside him through the hallway. I do not think people understand you, she said. Ethan smiled. Most people do not understand things they only see from the outside. She stopped for a moment. Does that ever bother you? Ethan looked toward the city outside the window. It used to, but then I realized I do not need everyone to understand my journey. I only need to stay true to it. Victoria carried those words with her. Because for the first time, she was not looking at Ethan Walker as a man who needed an opportunity. She was looking at him as someone who had always carried one. And soon, everyone in the company would discover that the quiet man they once overlooked was the person who could restore what they almost lost. The days that followed the meeting at Bennett Global revealed something unexpected. Ethan Walker had entered a world that once felt distant from him, but he never allowed the luxury offices, expensive suits, or powerful conversations to change the way he carried himself. Every morning, before arriving at the company, he still called Emma to hear about her day. Every evening, he still sat beside her at the kitchen table and listened to her stories about school. You are busy now, Dad. Busy does not mean I forget what matters. Promise. Ethan smiled. Always. For Ethan, success was never about returning to the top. It was about staying grounded while helping others rise. Inside Bennett Global, however, not everyone welcomed his presence. Some executives questioned why a man without a corporate title was suddenly influencing important decisions. They measured people by positions, appearances, and achievements written on paper. They did not yet understand that experience and wisdom do not always arrive wearing expensive clothes. Why should we trust him? One executive asked. He left the company years ago. Victoria Bennett heard the comment and looked across the conference room. Maybe the better question is why we stopped listening to him. Those words changed the atmosphere. Victoria was no longer defending Ethan because of a business decision. She was defending him because she finally understood the value of his character. Richard Bennett watched his daughter carefully. He noticed a change in her. The woman who once judged people quickly was now looking deeper. The transformation was quiet, but it was real. Later that afternoon, Richard met with Ethan privately. The room overlooked the city, but Ethan paid little attention to the view. "You must be angry," Richard said. Ethan looked surprised. "Why would I be?" "Because of how people treated you." Ethan paused. He remembered the years when his contributions were forgotten. He remembered leaving behind a career he had built. But he also remembered Emma waiting for him at home. "I was disappointed," Ethan admitted. But disappointment is not the same as bitterness. Richard became silent. He had spent decades believing power came from control. Ethan showed him another kind of strength, the kind that came from forgiveness and self-respect. "Why did you agree to help us?" Richard asked. Ethan looked at the documents on the table. "Because there are thousands of people who depend on this company. Their lives are bigger than our disagreements." That answer stayed with Richard long after the conversation ended. Meanwhile, Victoria continued learning more about Ethan's past. She discovered the sacrifices he had made, the opportunities he had turned down, and the quiet choices that shaped him. She realized something important. Ethan had not lost his place in the world when he left the company. He had found a different kind of purpose. One evening, Victoria met Ethan outside the building as the sun began to set. "I used to think success meant being above everyone else," she said. Ethan looked at her. "And now?" She smiled softly. "Now I think success means remembering everyone deserves respect." Ethan nodded. The journey was not finished yet. The company still faced challenges. The truth about the past was still unfolding. But something had already changed. The people who once looked at Ethan and saw an ordinary single father were beginning to see what had always been there. A man with quiet strength, steady grace, and a character that no title could ever measure. The pressure inside Bennett Global continued to grow, but Ethan Walker remained the same person he had always been. While executives rushed through meetings and searched for quick answers, Ethan took time to understand the people behind every decision. He knew that companies were not only built from numbers and systems. They were built from the dedication of thousands of individuals who trusted those systems every day. You always take time to listen first. Most problems become clearer when people feel heard. That is something this company forgot. Ethan looked across the conference room at Victoria Bennett. She knew he was right. For years, the company had focused on expansion, competition, and growth. Somewhere along the way, they had forgotten the importance of patience and responsibility. The next board meeting became a moment everyone had been waiting for. Senior executives gathered around the long table, expecting another discussion filled with complicated explanations. Some still doubted Ethan. They saw a single father without a corporate title sitting among leaders with decades of experience. But Ethan did not enter the room to prove them wrong. He entered because people were depending on the right solution. As the presentation began, Ethan calmly explained the issues he discovered. He did not blame anyone. He did not criticize past decisions. Instead, he showed how small, overlooked details had created larger challenges. The foundation was never the problem, Ethan explained. The problem was forgetting why it was built in the first place. The room became silent. The executives looked at the information in front of them. The answer had been there all along, hidden beneath years of assumptions. Richard Bennett watched Ethan carefully. He had spent his life searching for people who could make the company stronger. But he realized something important. Strength was not always found in confidence or authority. Sometimes it appeared in someone who stayed calm when everyone else was uncertain. After the meeting, Victoria walked with Ethan through the quiet hallway. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Why did you never tell anyone who you were?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Because I never wanted people to respect the title. I wanted them to respect the person." Victoria stopped walking for a moment. Those words affected her more than any business lesson she had learned. She remembered the restaurant, the way she looked at him, the way she assumed his value based on appearances. Now she understood how easily people could overlook something meaningful when they only looked at the surface. That evening, Ethan returned home and found Emma waiting for him with a drawing from school. "I made this for you." Ethan looked at the picture. It showed a father and daughter standing beside a bright sun. "It is beautiful," he said. Emma smiled. "My teacher said the strongest people are the ones who help others." Ethan hugged his daughter gently. "Your teacher is right." Later that night, Victoria stood alone in her office, looking at the city lights below. She thought about Ethan's words and the lessons she had learned. She had spent years building success, but she had forgotten that respect could not be purchased. It had to be earned. And somewhere between a quiet father and a powerful company, a new understanding had begun. The people who once measured worth by status were finally discovering the value of character. The following weeks brought a transformation that no one inside Bennett Global expected. The company was still facing challenges, but the atmosphere had changed. People were no longer rushing to protect their own positions. They were beginning to work together with a renewed sense of purpose. And at the center of that change was the man who never asked to be there. Ethan Walker continued arriving with the same simple routine. He carried his old leather folder, drank his coffee quietly, and spent time listening before offering solutions. "You really changed the way people think here." I only reminded them of what they already knew. Most people would want credit for that. Ethan smiled. Credit is not the reason people need help. Victoria Bennett heard those words many times, but they always affected her differently. She had spent years surrounded by people who wanted recognition, people who wanted their names connected to every success. Ethan was different. He cared about the result, not the applause. One afternoon, Victoria invited Ethan to a small community event organized by the company. It was not a formal business gathering. There were no investors, no executives, and no presentations about growth. It was a day focused on supporting local families and young students interested in technology. Ethan hesitated when he received the invitation. "I'm not sure I belong there." Victoria looked at him with a sincere expression. "That is exactly why you should be there." When they arrived, Ethan saw children exploring different projects, families sharing stories, and young people discovering new possibilities. He noticed something familiar in their faces. The same curiosity Emma had. The same hope he wanted to protect. A young student approached him with a question about technology. Ethan sat down and explained the answer patiently. He did not speak like an expert trying to impress someone. He spoke like a father helping a child believe in themselves. Victoria watched from a distance. She realized this was the person she had failed to see at the restaurant. Not because he had changed, but because she had only looked at the outside. Later that evening, she found Ethan standing near the entrance of the event. "I owe you another apology," she said. Ethan looked surprised. "Another one?" She smiled gently. "The first one was for judging you. This one is for not understanding you." Ethan nodded. "We all make mistakes when we think we already know the whole story." Those words reminded Victoria of something her father had taught her years ago. A person's success could open doors, but their character determined whether people wanted to stay. As the event ended, Richard Bennett approached Ethan. For the first time, there was no distance between them. "I spent many years believing leadership meant having all the answers," Richard said. "But I was wrong." Ethan listened quietly. Leadership means knowing when to listen. The two men shook hands, and the moment carried a meaning deeper than business. It was a recognition that respect could be rebuilt, that second chances were possible, that people could grow when they were willing to see beyond their own assumptions. As Ethan drove home that night, he looked at a message from Emma reminding him about their weekend plans. He smiled. No matter how much the world changed around him, the most important part of his life remained the same. He was still a father first. And that quiet truth was the reason people were beginning to understand the real strength he had carried all along. The change inside Bennett Global was no longer something people could ignore. What started as a difficult situation had become a reminder that companies were not only built by strategies and financial decisions, but by the people who carried those decisions every day. Ethan Walker had never entered the company looking for a position. He had never asked for recognition. Yet his quiet actions had created a change that many leaders had spent years trying to achieve. "You know, everyone here respects you now. Respect is not something you demand." "Then what is it?" Ethan looked across the office filled with employees working together. "It is something you earn when nobody is watching." Victoria Bennett remembered those words. She had changed more than she expected. The woman who once judged people by appearances now took time to understand their stories. She listened more carefully. She asked different questions. She no longer saw employees as numbers or positions on a chart. She saw people. But while the company was healing, Richard Bennett faced a difficult decision about the future. The board wanted a clear direction. Some members believed the company should continue focusing only on expansion and profits. Others believed the new approach Ethan introduced was the path forward. During the meeting, several executives looked toward Ethan, expecting him to speak first. But he remained quiet. Victoria noticed. "You have the answer, do you not?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "I have an opinion, but everyone here deserves the chance to share theirs." The room became still. It was a simple statement, but it represented everything Ethan believed. Leadership was not about having the loudest voice. It was about creating space for others to be heard. One by one, people shared their ideas. Employees spoke about improvements they believed could help customers and communities. Executives discussed ways to grow responsibly. For the first time in years, the conversation was not controlled by fear or pride. It was guided by purpose. After the meeting, Richard walked with Ethan through the quiet hallway. "I spent my entire career building this company," Richard said, "but I never realized I was also responsible for the culture inside it." Ethan listened carefully. A company reflects the values of the people leading it. Richard nodded slowly. He understood that his greatest lesson had not come from a business report or a financial forecast. It came from a man he once overlooked. Later that evening, Victoria met Ethan outside the building. The city lights reflected on the streets around them. "You changed my understanding of success," she said. Ethan smiled. "I did not change anything. You were willing to see something differently." Victoria looked at him for a moment. Most people would have wanted revenge after what happened at the restaurant. Ethan looked toward the busy streets. Revenge keeps people connected to the past. Growth allows them to move forward. Those words stayed with her. There was a quiet strength in Ethan that did not need attention. It came from years of responsibility, patience, and choosing kindness even when life was difficult. As Ethan returned home that night, Emma ran to greet him with a smile and a story about her day. He listened carefully, just as he always had. The world around him had changed. Powerful people respected him. A major company valued his wisdom. But the greatest reward remained the same. He was a father who never stopped showing up. And soon, the final truth about his journey would reveal that the greatest victories are not created by defeating others, but by becoming someone others are proud to stand beside. Months later, the city looked the same, but the people inside it had changed. The tall buildings still reached toward the sky. The streets were still filled with endless movement. But inside Bennett Global, there was a different spirit. The company had grown stronger, not only because of new decisions, but because people had rediscovered the importance of respect. Ethan Walker stood near the window of the conference room, watching employees work together. He still found it difficult to believe how much had changed. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Victoria Bennett asked. Ethan smiled. "Some parts. Even after everything. The quiet moments were valuable." Victoria understood what he meant. Ethan had never wanted attention. He had never searched for a way back into the corporate world. He had simply followed the same principle he lived by every day. Help when you can. Stay humble when you succeed. Remember who you are. The company held a special gathering to celebrate the new direction. Employees, families, and community members filled the room. But this time, Ethan was not standing in the background. People wanted to hear from him, not because of a title, not because of a position, because they trusted him. When Ethan stepped forward, the room became quiet. He looked at the faces around him and remembered the years when he felt invisible. He remembered the struggles of raising Emma alone. He remembered the moments when life seemed uncertain. "I do not believe people become valuable when others finally notice them," Ethan said. "I believe people show their value through the choices they make every day." The words touched everyone listening. Victoria watched from the front of the room. She remembered the first time she saw Ethan. She remembered judging him before knowing his story. Now she understood that the greatest mistake was not failing to recognize success. It was failing to recognize humanity. After the event, Ethan stepped outside into the evening air. The city lights reflected across the streets, creating a peaceful glow. Victoria joined him a moment later. I used to think power meant being the person everyone listened to, she said. Ethan looked at her, and now, she smiled. Now I think power means becoming someone others can trust. Ethan nodded. There was a comfortable silence between them. Not a silence filled with regret. A silence filled with understanding. Victoria gently hugged him, grateful for the lesson he had given her without ever trying to teach it. Ethan smiled. He knew life would still have difficult days. Everyone's journey did. But he also knew something important. A person could lose opportunities. A person could be misunderstood. A person could be overlooked for years. But dignity, kindness, and character were things nobody could take away. Later that night, Ethan returned home to Emma. She was waiting with a book and a smile. "How was your day, Dad?" she asked. He sat beside her and answered honestly. "It was a good day." And in that simple moment, Ethan realized the greatest reward was never the recognition from powerful people or the approval of the world. The greatest reward was knowing he had remained true to himself through every season of life. Because real success is not about standing above others. Real success is about lifting others while staying humble enough to remember where you started.